Women's Rights, the First Women's Rights Convention by Lawal Moldemaria.
Kate Nelson.
Mercedes Lycum.
In the 1800s, it was an important and exciting time period for the growth of the United States. Many events occurred, from the Civil War, the abolishment of slavery, to westward expansion. It was a period of change and adaptation that would kick off one of the biggest movements still going on today, the Women's Rights Movement, which began with the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York.
I was fortunate enough in my life to marry a man, Henry, who supported me in my opinions respectfully. However, I knew my position was unique, and wrongfully so. America, a place that is supposed to be different, a place of freedom for all, was indeed so, as long as you were a white man. We, the women, have worked and done our part to support the Blacks in their pursuit for freedom and their inalienable rights. And in that pursuit, we learned that we could fight for our own. I and a couple of my brave and incredible friends, Lucretia Mott, an activist in the racial and gender rights and the founder of the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society, Jane Hunt, who was our lovely host so that we could plan this entire event, Martha Wright, who put herself at risk by running a station for the Underground Railroad and the younger sister of Lucretia, and last but certainly not least, Mary McClintock, who is another founder of the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society, and who was kind enough to help me draft the Declaration of Sentiments, which we'll be going over shortly. We as a group have come up with a convention where we will speak freely and publicly about what we want to be changed, so that we as women can one day walk just as freely as men. It was July 19th, 1848, a Sunday, when we held our first meeting. We only allowed women this day, for none of these points, however important they may be considered by leading men, will be touched in this convention. During this day, we continued to the next day. We talked about the document I wrote, the Declaration of Sentiments, which took inspiration from the Declaration of Independence, with the crucial adjustment of we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. We began by discussing examples of biases and discrimination between the two genders. Biases such as women have to follow laws they have no voice in making. A man can take away any property and wages away from a woman, and marriage laws deprive women of guardianship of children upon divorce. This list goes on. A woman cannot obtain a thorough education because they are not admitted into colleges. Men and women are held to different moral standards, and women are denied rights even to the most ignorant and degraded men. It was crucial we spoke about these issues in order to talk about their solutions. On this declaration were 11 points, each their own amendment to how women should be treated and viewed in the public eye and in society, and all, for the most part, were agreed upon anonymously, except for one, and arguably the most important. On the second day, we reached number 9, women's right to vote, which is when things got complicated. With the wonderful help of our guest, Frederick Douglass, it was eventually passed. 68 women and 32 men signed the declaration. Unfortunately, many resigned after getting ridiculed for the action. However, we knew this path of justice would not be quick nor easy, and we were ready to take the long road.
When Elizabeth and I first met, we were both in London, where we both attended the 1840 World Anti-Slavery Convention with our husbands. We were Quakers, and my husband, James Mott, and I were both abolitionists. I was a preacher from Philadelphia, mostly known for my anti-slavery, women's rights, and religious reform activism. We were happy to support the cause, but when we found out the convention excluded women delegates solely based on their sex, we resolved to hold a women's rights convention. Elizabeth was the main force behind the Women's Rights Convention, and I helped her organize along with 5 other women who drafted a notice to announce a convention to discuss the social, civic, and religious conditions and rights of women. It was there at the Seneca Falls Convention where we wrote its main manifesto, the Declaration of Sentiments.
After the convention, the Declaration of Sentiments set forth the women's suffrage movement all over the United States. Although fighting for many things, the main fight for women was the right to vote and have a say in the political system that they live in just as much as men do. The fight for these rights began in the 1830s and lasted up until 1920, when women were given the right to vote by the 19th Amendment. Shortly after the convention, women were able to do a number of things, such as publicly speak in front of crowds, keep their own earned money, and also be able to have land in their names protected under some states. As you can see, it took a very long time for women to win the right to vote, as well as a lot of other things. Eventually, women gained the right to equality to their counterparts and have full citizenship, which comes with all the things men were given, that being education and employment opportunities, along with much more. In today's society, there are many things that women have to still live with in regard to women's suffrage that we sometimes don't even know it's happening. A huge impact that schools have on young girls is that they don't have the right to wear what they want, how they want, because if too much skin is showing, it'll distract the boys from learning. When either parents, society, or the education system needs to teach both boys and girls not to sexualize girls' bodies. Girls, or even women, are often told that we're asking for it if we wear revealing clothes, when that's not the case at all. Although women have come a long way in the work field, becoming leaders, managers, surgeons in the military, we still get belittled in the position. Because these jobs are often male intended, women get told that even if they are in the job position, they can't do it better than men, and because of that thought process, they get paid less. Women don't get the same amount of pay for the same amount of work as men do. Lastly, there is still so much discrimination and sexism in today's world that's unaccounted for. Growing up, I can testify that all around me, feminism is thought as the weaker sex. If men cry, they're weak. If they cook, they're girly. Men seeing other men do things that are often done by women are considered feminine. People often assume men are smarter than women because they were put in the superior position of masculinity. This is especially true for women in male-dominated jobs such as a laborer. Women are also often judged on their looks than on their performance or merit, especially if they don't fit a certain criteria or beauty standard. Women can't be pretty and smart, either one or the other. At least once in every girl's lifetime, they have had to turn down a man, but while doing so, there is always some fear of what might happen in response. When men are rejected, they sometimes can't take no for an answer. The only valid answer to really get them to stop is to say, I have a boyfriend. I shouldn't have to take that to get them to understand no means no. Girls are often taught from a very young age that girls can't do that because it's a manly job, whether it's verbally said or not. It still gets instilled in girls' brains that they can't, so they don't try. An action that way too often gets shrugged off is catcalling. It's one thing to compliment a lady for her looks, but to wail around and say inappropriate things and act like dogs is another. It makes her feel targeted and embarrassed. But when women do stand up to men and confront them for their actions, They don't take responsibility for them and make excuses, which makes women feel like their feelings don't apply to the situation. Women already have to deal with everything that comes with menstrual cycles, but the last thing they need is to be asked, "Are you on your period?" When women are, they're considered gross, when it's a natural reoccurrence. Women are allowed to have feelings and be in bad moods. Our feelings shouldn't be blamed on our body's way of life. While to most it's shocking, women can be successful and independent. It's often too thought of that when you see or meet a successful woman that she had to work so much harder than other women. That's when she gets idolized. When in some cases that may be true, women are just as able as men. We always have been. As you can see, there's still a lot of things that need to be worked on and changed in today's world, but we need to start by listening to women.
To expand on my own personal connection, I'd like to talk about when I was little, about my own culture, basically as an African American and being the first girl person to be born here in America. Basically, Kate, sorry, could you go real quick? I can't find my thing.
Some personal experiences that I have experienced with different biases between men and women is that I'm an athlete. I love sports and I love to play sports. And growing up, one of the biggest things that I noticed was that during PE or sports events, boys would never throw the football or whatever they're playing with to girls because they always assumed that they would drop it or they wouldn't be able to throw the ball back. Me being an athlete, I play soccer. I'm a goalkeeper for the soccer team and softball. I am fully capable of catching and throwing, and so are many other girls. It is not fun to be assumed that you are incapable of not being able to catch or throw. Another example of this is the women's national soccer team, who had to work very hard to get paid what they deserve, even though they were already a better team and were selling more seats than the men's national team. Although men are naturally stronger and faster, people don't take into consideration the fact that women work just as hard as men do. And although men and women strength-wise are not the same, they both deserve the same amount of appreciation.
Sorry, to go back to what I was saying earlier, to further on my own personal connection, as an African American and the first to be born here in the United States in my family, I was raised in a culture where women were secondary to men. Growing up, there were big differences in how my brothers and myself were treated and raised. I was supposed to be quiet, not cause any outbursts, whereas my brothers were free to do whatever they wanted. And my mother always tried to teach me to cook from a very early age, and I was very reluctant, even though I know it's an important life skill. I always complained to her and asked her why weren't my brothers learning, because after all, it is an important life skill and they should learn as well. And the only thing that my mother could give me any semblance of a response was because they were boys. Because they were boys, they didn't have to cook. And as a result, growing up, I had to do girl things, and I was raised to be quiet, sit properly, not run off outside with the rest of the boys, and instead just sit next to my mother, listening and just being bored as the adults talked. In church, it was a similar pattern, as I was forced to wear formal dresses and my brothers wore a simple t-shirt and jeans. And being an American and being compared from an American standpoint to my own culture, it was a very big difference between how girls were treated. One was treated more like an equal, whereas the other not so much. And because of these cultural differences, there was that were prevalent for me growing up as a girl, it was hard sometimes, reminding me and reminding me that women's rights aren't developed everywhere in the world and that we're still working towards equal women's rights everywhere and that there is still a very large disparity.
Overall, women's rights is something that we as a society are still fighting for today. Who knew that women from 172 years ago would be fighting for the same rights we are still fighting for today? Thanks to these 5 women and this convention, the movement got started off on the right foot, and without them, we would most likely be much farther behind in the women's rights movement. Although we still have a long way to go, and there are still biases that create a divide between our two genders, we are moving forward with women as world leaders, motivational speakers, and business owners. A topic like this might never become the perfect balance in relationship between men and women, but it's nice to know where the movement came from and that it all started with 5 brave women who were willing to fight and speak their mind to achieve rights they deserved. And here are our citations.